can be found on the second page of the program. He was born in Tokyo and attended Taito-ku University. After working as an assistant professor at Kyoto University's nuclear reactor experiment station, he became popular all over the country. He is engaged in lecture activities, sounding the alarm on the dangers of nuclear power. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. As you all know, we are talking about radioactive contaminated water from the Fukushima accident. The government and Tokyo Electric Power Company are moving towards discharging the water into the ocean. I want to stop this at all costs, so today I would like to talk about this. Thank you for giving me an hour of your time. However, it's very painful to talk with a mask on for an hour, so I'm going to have to distance myself a bit from everyone, so I'm sorry, but I'd like to take off my mask. Thank you. Applause is this what you can't see? Excuse me. Thank you very much. Title I would like to ask you to listen to my thoughts on why radioactive submarines should not be released. I don't think there is any need for the people of Fukushima to see this now, but on March 11th, 2011, on the same day, a huge earthquake and tsunami suddenly occurred, causing the major accident at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, where the reactor core melted without anything being done. The inside of the site was already in ruins. Do you understand this? Is the central control room, which has gone dark due to a power outage. This is where all the operations of the nuclear power plant were performed, but the electricity has been cut off and it is pitch black. There is a flashlight in the back. There was something on the cake, but it got to the point where you couldn't even read the cake, and there wasn't even any markings on the cake. Of course, the people at TEPCO thought they were trying to stop the accident by working with something like a flashlight. A nuclear power plant accident is something that should never happen, so everyone desperately wanted to do something. However, there was no electricity at all. Without electricity, the reactor could not be cooled down, and atoms would be released one after another. It turned out that the furnace was melting down. A huge amount of radioactivity came out, and I'm sure some of you were exposed to it, but at least the people who came here were able to escape. But there are many people who couldn't escape. This is a photo from a newspaper at the time. The title says, 4 kilometers from the nuclear power plant, police have no choice but to run away from the explosion, but they decided that there was nothing they could do, so they went to a large hospital called Futaba Hospital. There were about 400 patients at the hospital, but they all tried to escape. The hospital staff tried really hard to escape, but even as they ran away, their strength ran out and some died. A terrible incident occurred in which some people were left behind in the hospital to die without even being able to take them out of the hospital. Some liberal Democratic Party politicians still say that no one died in the nuclear accident. That's true, but the truth is that people who are socially vulnerable and those who are vulnerable to disasters are dying one after another. The number of nuclear power plant-related deaths has already exceeded 2,000 many years ago. Those who cannot do anything about it lose their lives, or and their own lives. Even people are leaving one after another, and the situation still continues unabated. Why are nuclear power plants so dangerous? I will now write a small qualification about the most fundamental thing. I'm sure you can't see it, but I'll write it down. What I was trying to show in this small capacity is 800 grams, which is the weight of uranium that was fissioned when the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. Someone was preparing water for me. It says 530 milliliters, but it's only 500 g. On the other hand, as soon as a similar amount of uranium was fissioned, the huge city of Hiroshima was destroyed in an instant. Nuclear power releases a tremendous amount of energy, and I hated the atomic bomb with all my heart. However, if something like this could produce enough energy to destroy a huge city, I thought that I would want to use it for the peace of humanity. When I went to university, I chose the Department of Atomic Energy in the Faculty of Engineering, because I wanted to work on nuclear power generation. This is just how much uranium must be covered in order to generate nuclear power. Today, the goal is to build a 1 million kW nuclear power plant. But the standard nuclear power generation, if we want to operate the first stage for 1 year, we will have to fission 1 ton of uranium. If we do not fission this kind of uranium, which exceeds the amount of uranium fissioned by the Hiroshima atomic bomb, nuclear power generation will not be possible. It was a stationary machine. Each fission of 800 grams of uranium produced 800 grams of fission products, or dead ash. Fission in 1 ton of uranium produced 1 ton of death. In other words, a nuclear power plant is a machine that operates day in and day out, producing vast amounts of radioactive material and storing it inside the reactor. Humans are the ones driving this opportunity, including accidents. And accidents. There is no machine that is immune to failures. Humans are not gods, and there are no humans who do not make mistakes. I thought that, if that happened, someday nuclear power plants would have an accident. I decided to stop nuclear power generation at all costs before a major accident occurred. I started thinking that I had to stop nuclear power, and I decided to turn my life around 180 degrees and live my life to stop nuclear power generation. They did. And they think like I did. But they thought that if they just did it carefully and installed a lot of safety devices, it would be okay. All the experts at the company thought that way. But they were also scared. Normally you would think, what would you do if you had an accident every day? So what they did was they made a very simple choice. We decided that nuclear power plants should not be built in cities. You are looking at a map of Japan right now, and I would like to write down the history of where nuclear power plants were built in this country called Japan. I think the first is Sakai Village, the second and third are Shoruga Beach in Wakasa Bay. This is Fukushima Daiichi, Shimen in the Shugoku region, Wakasa Bay, Takahama, Kyushu's Genkai, Shizuoka's Hamioka, Shikoku, Fukushima Daine, which has many Wakasa Bay nuclear power plants on Nagawa and Tohoku, Sendai and Kyushu, Kashiwazaki area in the Iigata Prefecture, Kashizaki area in Hokkaido, Noto Peninsula, Higashidari and Shimokita Peninsula, etc. This is how we built nuclear power plants in 17 locations nationwide. Before the Fukushima accident occurred on March 11, 2011, this country of Japan was planning to build two more nuclear power plants, one in Ome, the northernmost tip of the Shimokita Peninsula, and one in Seto. This is Kaminoseki, on the outskirts of the inland sea. Japan is a small country, but they have built nuclear power plants that cover the entire coastline. But all of these nuclear power plants are far away from the big cities of Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya. I knew that nuclear power plants posed a huge danger, and so did the people who promoted them. So we decided not to build nuclear power plants, and we decided not to build nuclear power plants in cities in this country called Japan. In the end, they built 57 nuclear power plants in 17 locations, all of which were approved when the Liberal Democratic Party was in power and were said to be safe. Of course, the Fukushima nuclear power plant was also said to be safe by the Liberal Democratic Party. That's how they built it in. Laid huge, long power lines to send electricity to the city. Before the Fukushima accident, TEPCO built another nuclear power plant. I had a plan to build one, and I'm still working on that plan on Higashidari. If you understand, TEPCO is a company that supplies electricity to the Kanto region. All of TEPCO's thermal power plants are located in Tokyo Bay, yes. Most of them are, but the nuclear power plant is not in the Kanto region, but Fukushima Daiichi Fukushima Daine. The Tohoku electric power company's telephone called Hikari Kashiwazaki imposed responsibility for the supply of electricity. And in the end, it was transferred to Higashidari, Tokyo. Electric power company had a plan to build a nuclear power plant and send electricity to Tokyo via long transmission lines. The cities would benefit from the electricity, but they did. And you want the cities to be at risk, so they move it to depopulated areas. This kind of unfair and unjust thing cannot be done just for that reason. In fact, it has nothing to do with whether there is enough electricity or not. Why did the Japanese people say that this kind of thing should not be done? I've always wondered if people didn't notice this, but unfortunately they did. The next thing you'll see is how much radioactive material was spewed into the environment after the Fukushima Daiichi disaster. What I want you to see is that there is an organization called the IAEA International Atomic Energy Agency that promotes nuclear energy internationally, and the Japanese government has issued a report to that organization asking what kind of radioactivity was released in the Fukushima accident and how much. I'm reporting this in detail in numbers, and I'd like to show you just one thing right now, the amount of cesium-137 released into the atmosphere. When nuclear fission occurs, a field called fission organisms is created. To put it more scientifically, is a collection of approximately 200 types of radioactive substances. Cesium-137 is one of them, as well as strontium-90, element 131, and xenon-133. There are a variety of radioactive substances, but the one that, I believe, poses the most harm to humans is this radioactive substance called cesium-137. Therefore, I would like to use that as a yardstick and listen to my story now. First of all, I drew a yellow square on the bottom left. This is the amount of cesium-137 that was dispersed into the atmosphere together with a mushroom cloud when the atomic bomb in Hiroshima exploded. In terms of numbers, it is 8.9 multiplication 10 to the 13th power vector, and the radiation is the unit of energy is becquerel. When measuring length, we measure cm, meters, and kilometers. When measuring weight, we measure g, kilograms, and tons. Radioactivity is simply measured in becquerels. It's a convention, so all you have to do is remember it. However, even if I say 8.9 x 10 to the 13th power becquerel, I don't think everyone will understand it at all. Therefore, please think that the Hiroshima atomic bomb released this yellow square cesium. In terms of how much nuclear power plants emitted, the no. One reactor alone produced the same amount of energy as the Hiroshima atomic bomb from June and June. The worst reactor was the number 2 reactor. The no. 3 reactor also produced a huge amount. On March 11, 2011, 3 nuclear reactors called Unit 1 and Unit 3 melted down, and together they spewed out 1.5 x 10 becquerels of cesium-137 into the atmosphere. The Japanese government says that, compared to the Hiroshima atomic bomb, it would be 168 tsubo.it. Would be extremely terrifying to have the equivalent of 1 Hiroshima atomic bomb entering China, but the amount equivalent to 168 atomic bombs was released into the atmosphere. The Japanese government is saying that the nuclear power plant in Hamadori, Fukushima Prefecture, where you all live, has released this much radiation. What happens to? No, it flows on the wind. The Japanese government has also created a map to show what kind of pollution was created as a result. As you all know, the Fukushima incident occurred on a beach in Fukushima Prefecture. It was right in the middle of the street from north to south, and this is where the radioactivity spewed out. On the east side, only the ocean side is land, but this country, Japan, belongs to the northern hemisphere temperate zone, and the high altitudes have westerly winds. Thanks to this, about 80% of the radioactivity spewed out from Fukushima flowed towards the Pacific Ocean. The remaining 20% was sent to the vast areas of the Taito-ku and Kanto regions. This map shows that the intensity of the contamination is shown in the lower right corner, and if you look at the areas colored red, yellow, and green in different colors, you can see that Fukushima was severely contaminated. The contamination is spreading northwest from the Daiichi nuclear power plant. The reason why this happened is because when the winds carried the radioactive clouds and blown them northwest, it caused rain and snow to fall in this area. Do you remember that day? It was a cold day, and snow fell in America, washing away the radioactivity and turning it into a highly contaminated area. More than 150,000 people were forcibly evacuated from this area. Some of you may have been forced to do this. One day, you were suddenly told to grab your belongings and run away. You were told to throw away all your dogs and cats, so you evacuated and then went back to your home. There are still tens of thousands of people who continue to live without water. And it's Not just the people in this red-green area that have been affected, there are many other contaminated areas as well. For example, here in Miharu town is the western edge of Abukeyuma-Kochi. However, where the blue strip is written north and south. This is NAKA-Dari.im. Sure, many of you who live in Nakadori are here today as well. Sure, there are many people who have lived here. From the north, Date City, Fukushima City, Nihonmatsu City, Koriyama City, Tsukigawa City, and Shirakawa City. Many people have lived here for a long time, but a cloud of radioactivity seems to be licking the place. This blue band shows that there has been contamination. The blue band also connects to Tochigi Prefecture, and also to the northern half of Gunma Prefecture. And to the west of Gunma Prefecture is Nagano Prefecture. However, on the border between Gunma and Nagano prefectures, there are quite high mountains, including Mount Asama, so the radioactive clouds that flowed over the mountains did not go over the mountains, but rather wrapped around the mountainsides and spread over the western part of Gunma Prefecture. It's contaminated. The area called Akutama in western Tokyo and Saitama Prefecture is also contaminated. I am sure there are many people who came today from places like Iwaki and Hamadori, but when the wind blows from the north, the radioactive clouds blow to the south. It's polluting the entire Hamadori area, and it's also polluting the downtown area of northern Chiba Prefecture. In the northern part of Ibaraki Prefecture, the degree is written in numbers, but I can't explain it in detail. But please, write in those numbers. The Japanese government is writing them in numbers, so I'll just ask you to listen to it for a moment. In the western part of Gunma Prefecture, there is an area painted in dull green. Yes. There is a radioactive substance called cesium. Earlier you heard about a radioactive substance called cesium-137. But there is also another radioactive substance called cesium-134, and the combined amount of both of them was 30,000 to 60,000 becquerels. In Fukushima, you can find this dull green in Aizu. Of course in the southern part of Miyagi Prefecture, in the northern part of Iwate Prefecture, and of course in Iwaki, in the southern part of Ibaraki Prefecture, in Chiba Prefecture, in the northern part of Tokyo. However, the area is 1 meter square per square meter, and the Japanese government says that 30,000 to 60,000 becks of cesium has accumulated there. However, I don't think many people will understand when you hear that number, so let's use an example for comparison. I would like to ask you just one thing. Until March 2015, I worked at the Kyoto University Nuclear Reactor Research Institute, a very special workplace where I operated nuclear reactors to create radioactivity and conduct research on it. I have already stopped doing this, but if I were to ask if I could conduct experiments on radioactivity here, of course I would. Not that radioactivity is dangerous, so I shouldn't work in a place where normal people can get close to it. When I went to work, I was required to work in a radiation-controlled area. And when I left the radiation-controlled area, there was a measuring device at the exit, so I was asked to measure my body to see if it was dirty. If you bring in experimental equipment, if it's dirty, you can't take it out, and that's how the law says that you can't take it out of the controlled area, because it would expose ordinary people to the atomic bomb. Well, the number is 40,000 becquerels per square meter. In other words, when you take anything out of a radiation-controlled area, you must not take anything that exceeds 40,000 becquerels per square meter. That was the law in Japan, but this dull green thing is already selling for 30,000 to 60,000 yen. Not saying that the earth is all dirty, but that my experiment equipment is dirty. When I went to Nakadori, where all of the first areas were dirty, I said blue, but there were 3 types of blue, and the outermost one was 60,000 to 100,000 yen dirty, which is the lowest in terms of contamination. It almost filled up Nakadori. The pale blue strip is contaminated with 100,000 to 300,000 becquerels. There are also spots of pale blue in it, and it is said that 300,000 to 600,000 becquerels of cesium fell there. Is that correct? For per square meter, anything exceeding 10,000 becquerels should not have been outside the controlled area. Yet there was contamination of hundreds of thousands of becquerels. Tell you the truth, vast swaths of land in the Taito-ku and Kanto regions were contaminated. The pollution exceeded the standards for radiation-controlled areas, but what happened was that Japan, which was a red-green country, forcibly evacuated residents from areas that were extremely contaminated and abandoned people in other areas. It has already been 12 years since the accident. The nuclear emergency declaration that was issued on that day is still in effect. You may have forgotten. But in GB, a state of emergency was declared due to a new type of virus called 19. Although the nuclear emergency declaration issued in the wake of the Fukushima accident is still in force, it has been repeatedly rescinded. This is Meru Town, where Abukunkochi production area is located and Nakadori is located, and it stands in what looks like a church. If you want to go into more detail, it is here. Miharu. Town is blue, dull green, etc. At that time, almost the entire area was so dirty that it had to be designated as a radiation control area. The same goes for Koriyama, and the same goes for Tamura City. Everyone was not allowed to go there. As I was just asking about this place, this map is, in addition to cesium-137, radioactivity called cesium-134 is also displayed. The dark blue area is 60,000 to 100,000 yen contaminated, and the lighter blue area is 100,000 to 300,000 yen contaminated. By the way, half of it is cesium-134, and that cesium-134 will be reduced by half after 2 years. It has already been 12 years, so it has reduced to about 160, which means it has disappeared voluntarily. However, the radioactivity of cesium-137 is a long-term radioactivity that takes 30 years to reduce to half. So it has hardly decreased. So, compared to the level of contamination at the time, about half remains today. There are about 50,000 to 100,000 cesium left in the dark blue areas, and I'm sure you live in Koriyama City. But there are still many contaminated areas that have to be designated as radiation control areas. Nuclear emergency situations. On the day of the declaration, the Japanese government issued an order stating that, since it is a state of emergency, there is no need to abide by the law. In Japan, ordinary people are not allowed to be exposed to more than 1 millisievert of radiation in a year. There was a law called, as you just heard, when you take things out of a radiation-controlled area, you can't take anything with a concentration of over 40,000 becquerels per square meter. But that's no longer the case. So, who is responsible for the Fukushima accident, which the government has determined is the case? There are many victims of such an accident, where enormous damage has been caused and people still suffering, so who is the perpetrator? Specifically, TPCO. I believe that everyone from the chairman and president down has an extremely heavy responsibility. As Mr. Muto said earlier. On the 18th, there was a verdict in the TPCO trial, and they said they were not guilty. The verdict was that it couldn't have been predicted because it was a huge, unexpected earthquake and tsunami. Thought the court was really corrupt, but no one was taking responsibility for it. And I'm more concerned than TPCO. In Japan, nuclear power is said to be a state policy and private operation, and the government makes all the decisions, lays rails, and has the power companies above them run them. Nuclear power plants have been certified as safe. I think the biggest culprit is the government. What the country did was that it was in a nuclear emergency. So they promulgated special measures laws that did not protect ordinary laws. And they are still dumping people in radiation-controlled areas. A little while ago, I gave a session called 137 about radioactive substances. Even after 30 or 100 years, it will take only 10 minutes to reduce by half. Still, vast areas are extremely contaminated. Even if cesium-137 levels were reduced to 1/10 in 100 years, Fukushima Prefecture still has a large amount of land that must be designated as a radiation control area. Therefore, even after 100 years, I don't think this country, Japan, will be able to lift its nuclear emergency declaration. I am dead, and, of course, you're all dead too. The babies who were overlooked are probably dead as well. Even in the future, when Japan, the country, has no choice but to continue declaring a state of nuclear emergency, an accident of such magnitude occurred, and the plateau was contaminated with radiation, and everyone was exposed to the atomic bomb. It's dangerous. I'd like you to take a look at the history of how far we've come to understand the danger. At the bottom, there are several hours written from 1900 to 2000, but this is the Western calendar. The vertical axis is 0.010.11010010 million 10 million, and so on. It increases by a factor of 10 every time you go up one level, and this is what is called the permissible amount of radiation exposure, which is written on the vertical axis. There is a line here, and it says that it allows up to 1000 millisieverts per year. Think of this as a standard. 1000 millisieverts means 1 sievert per year. That's the height. Humans first learned about radiation in 1895. Until then, there was no such thing as radiation. I mean, I didn't even know that it existed, and I didn't even know that there was an atomic bomb. But in 1895, when they learned that there was radiation, many scientists began researching what radiation was. For example, everyone called the distance research. As you probably know, the Kowloons were also involved in research, but they didn't know how dangerous radiation exposure was. At that time, the permissible amount was tens of thousands of millisieverts per year, or 1. The standard was that it was okay to be exposed to as many as 10 degrees Celsius belts per year, but to tell you the truth, if a person were exposed to 8 sieverts per year, they would die. If you do that, you will die. But when you don't know what it really is, this is the standard. So I'll call you Pierre, the husband of distance debt. And he was also exposed to the atomic bomb while doing research, and his body was ruined. One day, he fell down on the road and was hit by a horse-drawn carriage and died. Marie died of leukemia. This was the standard in the days when people were able to see more and more doctors, but scientific knowledge was not enough. As the number of people increased, salaries became more and more difficult, and they continued to decline. And By this time, we had reached the
研究者だけじゃない、職業人だけでなくて一般の人々も被爆から守らなきゃいけないというような
point where we had to protect not only researchers, but also professionals, and the general public from being exposed to the atomic bomb. Since then, wages have been revised more and more, but they changed like this at and the beginning. It was like this 1-3 when it went down. It became 110, then 1100. The number has continued to decline, but it will only increase as scientific knowledge increases. We have been saying for a long time that exposure to radiation is dangerous, and that we must protect people by setting salaries. International standard was 1 millisievert per year for the general public, but then the Fukushima accident happened, and what the Japanese government did was to do something like this. We have decided that it is okay to expose the general public to the same amount of radiation exposure as professionals. I just heard about the radiation control area, where the radiation level exceeds 1.3 millisieverts in 3 months. In other words, a place where the radiation level exceeds 5.2 MSV per year must be designated as a radiation control area. It is 0.6 micro SV per hour, and I think some of you may be able to take measurements with a measuring device. Sure, there are some people who are struck by this number. There are many places around you where the temperature exceeds 0.6 microsievert per hour. I am also walking around Fukushima with a measuring device, but there are many. The law says that ordinary people are not allowed to enter, but only people like me who do special jobs are allowed to enter. As soon as they enter the radiation-controlled area, they are prohibited from eating or drinking. Radiation control, there are no toilets in the area, and you are not allowed to sleep there. The area is contaminated with radioactivity, so we are obligated to constantly measure how contaminated it is. When you take something out of there, it is tested for radioactivity, and if it exceeds 40,000 becquerels per square meter, you must not take it out. This is a radiation-controlled area, and the people who work there are involved in radiation work. I was asked, will I be paid a legal label? That's the case with me. What do? I get a pool. I also work as a radiation worker, and I receive a salary from Kyoto University, doing dangerous work. That's why, in exchange for giving them a little extra pay, they are told to put up with radiation exposure. They are told to put up with radiation exposure up to 20 millisieverts per year, and in return, they are required to have the opportunity to regularly measure their radiation exposure. I have an atomic bomb exposure handbook. I am required to keep a record of how many millisieverts I was exposed to in a year. I am also required to undergo periodic medical checkups to my employer. Workers are required to undergo proper medical examinations. If they are exposed to more than 5 millisieverts per year on average and develop leukemia, it will be recognized as a work-related accident. If you work in a radiation-controlled area and develop leukemia, there is a system that says it's an industrial accident, and those people are radiation workers. So, what do you think about everyone in Fukushima? Ordinary people are being abandoned in radiation-controlled areas. Everyone, including the children, is living a normal daily life, and all they have to do is eat, drink water, go to the bathroom, sleep there, and the children go to school and play.
させられています。
They don't get paid,
彼らは
they
給
do.
料をもらうわ
And
け
he
では
get
あり
any
ません。
benefit from
何の利益もない。
contamination, and children who are highly sensitive to radiation
子
are
供たちも放射線業務従事者と同じだけの被爆を我慢
forced to
する
endure the same exposure as
ということ
radiation
がさせら
workers.
れています。
Originally, the plan was to have a monitoring post, but there was a movement to remove it as well, and I'm sure many of you are among those who resisted it. There is no A-bomb survivor notebook, and we don't even know how many people were exposed to the A-bomb.ASA system. Children under the age of 18 were not allowed to undergo regular health checkups, and
今小児甲状腺がんというものが問題
children under the age of 18 at the time were
18
not
歳以下の子供たちは、まあ
allowed to undergo regular health checkups. We are now.
それすらどんどんもうなくしてしまおうというように国が動いているという
In a situation where the government is trying to get rid of the disease, no matter what kind of illness you get, it will not be recognized as a work-related accident. A causal relationship will also be denied. Currently, a child with thyroid cancer is being tried in court for thyroid cancer. However, the government and TEPCO are approaching the trial with the attitude that they will never accept such a thing. In the end, it is the victims of the Fukushima accident who will not be able to receive any guarantees. What on earth is going on? So this is what it looks like. This is an
これは湯木美里さんという
illustration drawn by an illustrator named Misato Sashi.we. Call it a red tube illustration. It has a red dot on it, which is radioactivity. It was created by the Japanese government and was shown to everyone earlier,
先ほど皆さんに
as you saw in Fukushima Prefecture.
福島県は放射線管理区域にしなければいけないほど放射能
It is contaminated with radioactivity to the extent that it has to be designated as a radiation control area. I am not saying that .it apostrophe is not that the country has made a map that shows that it's contaminated with rumors. The fact is that it's selling well. If children and others are abandoned, they
毎日被爆しながら暮らすしかない
have no
ということになってる
choice but to live their lives, destructing themselves every day. Unfortunately, radiation cannot be felt with the five senses. If you can feel it, you can treat it. Let's escape. You may feel that way, but you are in a state where you are exposed to radiation without even being able to feel it. We have already spent a lot of time on this. Today's
来ました、今日の本
main topic is radioactive contaminated water, so I will briefly discuss that. I'm going to ask you to listen to this now. This is a diagram created by
これ
Tokyo
東京電力が作ってる図ですけれども
Electric Power Company. As you mentioned earlier, the original
元々の
height of the site was 34 meters above sea level.
海抜34メートルという高さだったんですけれども
When building the reactor, they dug it out, and the reactor building and turbine stand were built 10 meters above sea level. So the structure is like this. If you
こんな構造になっているのでこの掘ったところはまあなんて言うんでしょうね
compare it with the surrounding area,
周りから比べれば
of course all the groundwater and rainwater
地下水も雨水もみんな
flows there. The
わけです
reactor edge is here, and
ここにあって
rainwater and groundwater flow into the reactor building
建屋に流れ込み新たな
and become new contaminated water. TEPCO has written
書いている
that there is a
冗談ではないんです 原子力
large amount of radiation. It apostrophe s not a joke. By the way, it's a radiation control area. Radiation control air must not be connected to the outside world. Even the air is flowing, it's not allowed. It's too close because it's a radiation control area, and there's no way that it could come my end. However, it's flowing into the area and it's becoming new contaminated water. I told them to stop making fun of it, and that we should first make sure that the function of the radiation control area is maintained.
地下水を遮断しなければいけないと
I started doing that in May 2011, thinking that we had to cut off the underground water supply, but unfortunately neither the government nor Tokyo Electric Power Company accepted what I said. Everyone mentioned the wall earlier. However, we spent over 30 billion yen in national funds, tax money, our money, on something like Taito Station, which is meaningless, and
金ですよ私たちの金ですよ
built meaningless road walls.
込んで意味のない凍土壁を作っていまだに汚染水がどんどん増えると
resulting in a situation where the amount of contaminated water is still increasing. If it's true, the First thing we need to do is build a proper ejaculation weapon to prevent rainwater and groundwater from flowing into the area, and even though it's too late, we still have to do it now. However, the amount of contaminated water is increasing rapidly, and what to do about it? Is this diagram drawn by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industries Crafts and Energy Agency? If you remove the tritium as the target, and if you remove other things other than tritium, you won't be able to get just the tritium, so it can't be helped. But the Energy Agency has created a diagram like this, which says that it has been storing it in tanks. Is this true? It's a lie. This is a diagram created by the same Crafts and Energy Agency. Currently, about 1.3 million ton worth of contaminated water has accumulated on the Fukushima site. However, in addition to tritium, there are various other substances in the contaminated water, including strontium, 90 element 129 and ruthenium 106. There is still a lot of radioactivity out.
国の法律を守るなら海なんかに放出できないというほど存在しているんです。
There, if we were to follow the national laws, we would not be able to release it into the ocean. It's still 1 to 5 times more polluted than this, 5 to 10 times, 10 to 100 times more than 100 times more polluted than this, which somehow passes the standards. Tritium is different. Tritium is different. It's no longer possible to meet the standards at all, but other than tritium, this is the only thing that has passed the standards. The rest are all still in the tank without being able to pass the standards. This is clearly contaminated water with radioactivity. Because it's radioactive contaminated water, tritium. T'(S) radioactive, so we know for sure that it exceeds the standard value. This water is actually all about radioactivity. And even excluding tritium, 70% of it is still radioactive. This figure is said by the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy itself. And here's how much it represents. The storage capacity of the tanks is 1,395,400 tons, and more than 1,000 tanks are currently in operation. Among them, the water that TEPCO has been calling treated water is so-called tritium water, but as you just heard, 70% of the water is still in the process of being treated. In addition to that, there are strontium-treated water and concentrated waste liquid, which totals more than 1.33 million tons, which has already accumulated and is being dumped into the sea because there is no room for it anymore. That's what the government and TEPCO are saying. But what should we do with tritium? Think you all learned what water is in class when you were in junior high school, and this is ordinary water. What it represents is O is oxygen and H is hydrogen. We call it H2O, which has 2 hydrogens surrounding 1 oxygen, but this is ordinary water. However, what we usually call hydrogen is inside things. There is hydrogen that is twice as heavy as ordinary hydrogen, which we call deuterium, and there is water that contains IT. What this means is that one ordinary hydrogen is written as pure hydrogen D, but this is water that contains a heavy water tank with oxygen on both sides. So what is tritium water? Tritium is written as T. However, around oxygen there is one ordinary hydrogen and one hydrogen called tritium. This is tritium water. This is the tritium water that is in the tank at Fukushima, the radioactivity teacher. Chemically, it's water. It's exactly the same water. So, chemically, no matter How much you try to clean contaminated water and remove radioactivity, tritium is already water itself, so you'll never be able to remove it. What are you doing? It's the tritium water level that is no good. No, there are people who say it will somehow work out, but to be honest, it will work out somehow. If we apply isotope separation technology, we can separate tritium water from ordinary hydrogen and extract it. Yes, but doing so would require a huge amount of energy, making it virtually impossible to apply isotope enrichment technology to the 1.3 million tons of contaminated water from Fukushima that has already accumulated, which means it is no longer tritiated water. However, we are now in a situation where there is nothing we can do about it. So what can we do? Human beings do not have the power to eliminate radioactivity. If we keep them locked up for as long as possible, we have no choice but to wait for the radiation to diminish on its own. This means that there is always non-technical side effect. There is no safe exposure, as you saw earlier. Humans do not have the power to eliminate radioactivity, and neither does nature. The idea that humans do not have the power to eliminate radioactivity, so just flush it into the ocean, is a mistake from the beginning. Flush radioactivity into the ocean. There are many practical and easy to implement measures to prevent a contaminated water that has accumulated at the Fukushima nuclear power plant from flowing into the ocean. As you mentioned earlier, there are other ways to do this, such as building large coal mines or moving them with mortar. The truth behind the ocean's injection into the underground is that there are many other things to do, such as injection. B. Most important thing is to do this to buy time until tritium water appears in the living environment. Earth is called the planet of water. Contaminating bad water with radioactivity would be the ultimate environmental contamination. However, I don't have time to discuss this in detail today, but this planet Earth is also affected. Tritium has existed from the beginning. It's very small. It's written here on the bottom right. Sure, it's also in the materials you have, so you can look at it later, but in space, in spaceships, tritium is produced by the radiation that is flying around, and there is a certain amount of tritium that exists on Earth, but past atmospheric nuclear tests contaminated the entire Earth with 100 times more tritium than the atmospheric cabinet test. This was already 50 or 60 years ago, so now that tritium has been reduced to about 1/100th, and it's almost the same amount as the amount of tritium that was originally found in nature. Now, in Fukushima's contaminated water. And then, as you'll hear about later, once we start the 6 factories first, tritium disappears year after year again, and now the Liberal Democratic Party has once again started talking about nuclear fusion. However, if nuclear fusion were to be implemented, I believe that it would require the use of enormous amounts of tritium as fuel, which would cause irreparable environmental pollution. We're trying to implement the easiest method. Tritium cannot be flushed into the ocean as it is. If it's a radioactive poison, we can't flush it directly into the ocean, so the plan is to dilute it and slowly release it into the ocean. I don't have time to listen to detailed discussions, but the amount of tritium currently stored in the tank is gradually decreasing to 1,920 trillion becquerels, which is written here, and about half of that is in the current tank. Tokyo Electric Power Company says that it will proceed with this process little by little and dump it into the ocean, but if this is done perfectly, Tokyo Electric Power Company will be able to do it perfectly, just like the government is doing, and in 2046 is Everyone's still alive. I'm probably dead.
私多分死ん
I'm
でます。多くの方死んでお亡くなりになってると。
sure many of you are dead,
で
but
も
the
今
tritium
タ
that
ンクに
isn't
な
in
い
the tank now
トリチウムも
will
いずれ
eventually
また
come out again,
出てく
so
る
I'll
わけで
let
すから汚染
it flow into the ocean as
それもまた
contaminated
海へ
water.
流す
In
と
that
する
case,
なら
it will
結
take
局
50
50
years,
年かかります
I think.
多分今日この会場にいらっしゃる
Most of the people in this room today are dead. All the people
東京
involved
電
with
力の関係
TEPCO
者
are
も
dead.
みんな死んでいる
National bureaucrats are also dead. Even the academics who certified it as safe are dead. It's such a terrible situation.
そんな
This
大
means
変
that
なことなんです。東京電力が最も簡単だと思っている
even
や
if
り方を取
TEPCO
ったと
takes
して
what
も
it thinks
大
is the
変だ
easiest method, it will still be difficult.
という
When
こと
the
になります。
Fukushima accident
事故
occurred,
が起きて
as we said earlier,
先ほ
no
ど聞い
one
ていただいたように誰一人責
took
任を
responsibility for the accident, and so far 57 aircraft have been destroyed. The nuclear power plant in Fukushima was built by the Liberal Democratic Party, saying it was safe, and the power companies, nuclear industry general contractors, research groups, academic courts, and the media all work together to
全てがグルになって原子
promote
力
nuclear power. The
です。
Fukushima nuclear power plant was also supposed to be safe,
で
but
も事故を起こした。
aren't they responsible for causing the accident? They said it was safe,
安全だと言った彼らに。
but
でも
none of them are supposed to take responsibility.
取らないということになっているんです。私は
Think they are a group of criminals, so they should punish every single one of them.
処罰しなければ
Unfortunately, I can't do it,
思っています。残念ながら
but I would like to do it.it'. Difficult for them, though. I am trying to actively try to make it seem like the Fukushima accident never happened, in order to somehow forget about it. They have taken
もう積極的にやっているわけです。
control of the educational media and education, and have been trying to make people forget about the Fukushima accident one after another. Even the children who have free time are saying things like, there's nothing to be afraid of being exposed to the atomic bomb, because the food from Fukushima is safe. We are trying to get our children to eat, calling it food education, and we are trying to do something like that, and we are trying to get our children to eat, and we are trying to do something like that, and we are trying to start nuclear power plants that are currently shut down, something that we were not supposed to do for over 40 years, but until 1960, we've already decided that it's okay, but we're trying to decide to extend it even further, and we're going to develop new nuclear reactors, we're going to develop nuclear fusion theory, and we're going to go back to nuclear power. As they advertise one after another, they try to dissipate billions of yen and billions of yen in advertising costs. These are the people I call the nuclear mafia. Their ultimate goal is to bomb the Nagasaki atomic bomb. The ultimate goal is to get into our pockets plutonium, a substance that was used as a raw material. To achieve this, we must perform reprocessing. So we must first operate 6 factories at all costs. We are currently making plans to do so. The Fukushima accident was seen at the beginning, but unfortunately it happened. There was nothing we could do to prevent it from happening. They should have not moved it in the first place, but they forced it and ended up causing an accident. I'm sure they didn't want this kind of accident to happen, but instead of accomplishing anything, the accident happened and radioactivity was released. But now they have a lot of options to choose from as to what to do with the radioactivity that has been stored in the tank, but they are trying to do something like dump it into the ocean, even though there is. Of course, I am against it, but those who are promoting nuclear power have no choice but to dump it into the ocean. Actually, the reason is that I want to operate the 6 reprocessing plants, no matter what. I am the Fukushima accident that you just saw. 250 tons of fuel melted down. I have written down the details in the figures, so I will explain them later. 250 tons of fuel was melted down, and some of the cesium that was in it came out while it was waiting. Some of the tritium is now sitting in the tank. But what would have happened if the Fukushima accident hadn't happened? Of course, the plan was for the melted down reactor core not to thaw out, but to be sent to 6 factories first, where it would be reprocessed and be plutonium extracted. However, it is not possible to capture tritium, so the initial plan was to release all the tritium into the ocean at the 6 plants. Initially, the plants would process 800 tons of spent fuel per year. The plan was to release all the tritium contained in it into the sea at 6 villages. In the Fukushima accident, 250 tons were reprocessed at 6 locations. The factory would release all the tritium contained in 800 tons per year into the sea. Even so, the government has given approval to 6 factories, saying it is safe. They want to operate them no matter what. If it is decided that tritium from Fukushima should not be released into the ocean, 6 factories will be approved first. If the plutonium cannot be extracted, the foundation of Japan's nuclear power system will collapse. Therefore, no matter how much the fishermen of Fukushima around the world oppose the specifications, no matter how many countries around the world protest, this country, Japan, has no other choice but to release radioactively contaminated water into the ocean. Of course, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but that's the only choice the country has. So, everyone today, I asked everyone to talk about the contaminated water in Fukushima, but the story of the contaminated water in Fukushima is different from Fukushima. It is a very important battle because it is connected to the roots of Japan's nuclear power development, is about to take place right now. This is a similar illustration to the previous one. I want to end my story with this one. But I was in a nuclear field. At the beginning, my dreams fell. It was very stupid. I believe that I have heavy responsibility for the Fukushima accident, which is incomparable to all of you. However, in this country called Japan, we have built a forest of 57 nuclear power plants, so I have to take special precautions. I believe that all of you who are here today have some responsibility for coming that far without paying and allowing the Fukushima accident to occur. However, the children are not responsible for the atomic bombing. I'm extremely sensitive. What I think we should do is that even if we were to be exposed to radiation, it is the responsibility of adults living in Japan to protect our children. Regarding the individual accident of Fukushima, that's true, including the fact that school lunches are contaminated with radioactivity. I think adults should prevent this from happening. But at the same time, it's important to stop using nuclear power. I think that means that the nuclear power mafia is trying to promote nuclear power more and more, but I think that the responsibility now lies with us to stop them. I would like to borrow your help by all means. That's it. Thank you very much.